My name is Olson. I work as head of sustainability at the architectural firm Link Architecture. My main work is working with strategic sustainability in relation to our architectural services and our collaboration with our clients, developing our focus in relation to this, that is, defining and developing our focus in relation to the sustainability aspects that deliver the most positive impact and value for our clients, and also how we can design to deliver on those aspects. We are a Scandinavian architectural business. We have some 500 employees. We have offices in all over Sweden, Norway and Denmark. And we work with sustainability as a central part of our business offer to our clients. The 6 focus areas are carbon emission. We also talk about climate smart architecture. The next one is circular economy or circular architecture. And then we work focused with biodiversity. On the social sustainability side, we work with safe environments, health and well-being, and then placemaking. So if we start with climate smart architecture or carbon emission as focus, we work very much on designing buildings with a low carbon emission or a carbon footprint. And that is both from operations when it comes to energy efficiency, but also when it comes to embodied carbon, which means the carbon that is emitted when producing the materials that goes into a building. If we then talk about circular economy and circular architecture, it's very much about designing resource efficient, securing that we don't use resources unnecessarily, but also about taking care of the buildings that are already built, so transforming or renovating buildings before we start looking for producing new buildings. It's also about reuse and recycle of materials, and also designing for circularity, preparing our buildings for a future that is more circular than it is today. And then we can talk a little bit about biodiversity. We know that the building environment and producing materials and constructing the buildings have a great negative impact on biodiversity. So when working with the built environment, it's really important to look at biodiversity and see how we, when we construct our buildings, can choose materials that have a low impact on biodiversity, and also work with biodiversity when we create the environments, the built environments within the cities. If we then talk a little bit about the social sustainability that we work with, it's one of the areas are safe environments. We know that creating safety within, for example, residential areas, schools, housing, etc., creates people that feel safe and can take in, for example, in schools, can take in their education better. They come to school. I mean, not being safe at school can make students not come to school. So safety is a very important part of our contribution to social sustainability. And then we can talk a little about the health and well-being. That is important part if you work with offices, hospitals, schools, also residential areas. If you can support a living that is healthy and supports well-being, then you can solve or contribute positive to some societal challenges. We know stress is a area in at least the Western world that is problematic. We know that the different heart diseases and so on. And then the last one is about placemaking, and that is both about safe environment but also about interesting environment, places where you want to stay, places where diverse people can come and meet, and you can feel the inclusiveness because you want to stay there, you want to meet other people. When it comes to the architect's role in relation to sustainability and sustainable development, we play an important role because we usually get in pretty early in the processes and the project development, and thereby we can be part of setting a vision that fully integrates sustainability so that it can be a base for decision made during the design and also during the construction phase. And then we also play a very important role when it comes to the actual design. So through the design we can work with, for example, indoor environment when it comes to designing so that daylight comes into the building, that you have a good view of the scenery, and also working with designing so that we minimize the negative impact of the built environment in relation to resource usage or carbon emission and stuff like that. And then when we come to looking at choices that we make, for example in relation to materials, we have a great possibility to influence the final positive impact in relation to sustainability by choosing materials that we know can lower, for example, the carbon emission, the carbon footprint of the building, or adding to some qualities in relation to indoor environment. Well, if we talk about materials, we know that the construction industry and the producing materials have a great negative impact on the environment. It's everything from polluting the air and the water. It's about using resources, virgin resources, that is rare or scarce or limited. So we have to make sure that we don't use them too much, because then we'll run out of them. It's also about, we know, for example, that 80% of all drinking water goes into producing different materials. We know that 80% of the loss of biodiversity is coming from producing materials, foods, etc. So it's a very important part when choosing materials that we look upon materials not only from a cost perspective and a quality perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective, and always try to look and find the materials that gives us the most bang for the buck, the most positive impact in relation to the investment that we do. When we talk about aluminum, that is a very good material because you can recycle it over and over again without it losing its qualities and so on. And it's also good because there is a lower carbon footprint when you work with recycled aluminum than with virgin aluminum. So it makes sense to work with aluminum and recycle it and so on. We know that the construction industry is emitting some 40% of all carbon emissions. And we also know that the built environment has a big impact on water and biodiversity. And all this together makes it really important to work holistically in relation to sustainable development. And talking about carbon emission, it's really important that we not only look at the operation, because if we look at carbon emissions, we have 1/3 that comes from embodied carbon and 2/3 that comes from operation. But we also know that carbon emission from embodied carbon is carbon that is emitted day one. And we're quite in a hurry to turn the trend in relation to carbon emissions. So therefore, we have to have some 40% lower carbon emission in relation to embodied carbon at 2030 to be able to reach the 1.5 degree target that is defined by the Paris Agreement. So a building that is not addressing embodied carbon, I would say, is not a sustainable building at the moment. then it comes very natural that the one that has the lowest carbon emission is the best one to choose from a sustainability perspective. So then you can compare one with another and go for the one that has the lowest carbon footprint. You should always start with taking care of the negative footprint of your own production, because that one you can be 100% sure of makes a difference. When choosing to compensate, you will never know if that forest that you have planted as a compensation will be there in 20 or 30 or 40 years. Is there a trade-off between climate-friendly design and aesthetics? No, I would say it's not, especially if you can work with circularity. There is actually good possibilities to develop that further and create very unique aesthetics. So no, I would say there is not. To add on that, I would say that at the moment when we are in a situation of transferring from one type of sustainability agenda to another, there can be limitations, but moving forward, sustainability will be the new black, and then that will not have a negative impact on aesthetics, I would say.